Welcome back to episode 15 of the Jungle Fever podcast. I'm Ethan Sargent, and Crowley is alongside me as always. And we have a game to preview this week. Don't that feel good to say? Don't that feel
Oh,
good to talk
that's
about? There's a
amazing.
game to preview this week. The Bengals are in Philadelphia to take on the Super Bowl champions, the Philadelphia Eagles, in game one of the preseason. We're going to see a lot of the big guns get big minutes. We're going to talk about that later on in today's show, but we have a lot to round up from what's been a very, very eventful week of Bengals training camp. But we have to start with something that happened off the field first, and that the Bengals bring in a new face in the tight end room. How about Noah Fant coming on down to Cincinnati? Has had stops in Denver, former first round pick, was in Seattle, was involved in the Russell Wilson trade, has had an up and down ish career, but has always shown that flashiness as a pass catcher from the tight end position. And now he comes and he adds yet another weapon to Joe Burrow's arsenal.
Yeah, and I think the thing that stands out a lot with Fant is just his athleticism for his size. And I know a lot of fans online were frustrated, I think is probably the best word to use it. Because I mean, there's some glaring holes with this team that we've talked about a lot. And, maybe tight end two wasn't necessarily exactly where fans wanted to see this team upgrade, but the Bengals saw it as an opportunity to make this team better. And I do think that this move makes this team better.
I agree.
Um, Mike Gesicki obviously is not going to provide much in the run block game. I'm not saying that Noah Fant does. However, I would kind of compare Noah Fant more to like an Eric All kind of style tight end. And we saw
Agreed.
the way that the
Yep.
Bengals like to utilize Eric All last year in that 12 personnel that they went to a lot more. I think Noah Fant can kind of slide into that role. Obviously, All's missing all the year with that ACL tear. And I think it's a definite upgrade over Tanner Hudson. I think Drew Sample obviously still has a role with this team as kind of that more traditional blocking tight end. However, I think you can kick Gesicki out to the slot a little bit more often with a guy like Noah Fant. It just provides more options, more versatility for an
Agreed.
offense that already has a very high ceiling. I think this just slightly raises it just that much more. And when you're competing for what they think competing deep in the playoffs and everything, you're always looking for that slight edge, and this is a spot they could get better. So I'm a fan of it.
It just feels like a move that is going to pay off at some point, right? Like there will be a week likely where an injury comes, whether it is at the wide receiver position or at the tight end position. Gesicki
I
injured
was gonna
right now, as a matter of fact. He will not play in Philadelphia. We'll get to some more of the injuries later on in the show. But this is the feels like a type of move that is going to pay off in that Noah Fant, not only does he elevate the ceiling of this, but I also feel like it raises the floor, right? You lose a guy in Eric All, who it's an unfortunate fact. Eric All dealt with the injuries in college, was so good when he played early last year, has another ACL tear to the same leg. We'll see if he ever comes back. I really hope he does because what we saw from him last year was a really, really capable tight end in this system. But this is not a like, and I'm so glad you brought up the comparison because that's what this is. This is an Eric All replacement. They never really got that. Mike Gesicki was never that. Drew Sample isn't that. Tanner Hudson is like a
trying
worse
to be.
version of that, right?
Yeah.
Exactly. They bring in a guy that can block in line, right? Not quite as good as Eric All can, but he can block in line, but he's much more of a threat as a pass catcher. He can make plays in the passing game, and he's going to get a lot of snaps in this offense. He is going to get a lot of opportunities to catch the football in this system. And I think if you're Noah Fant, right, from a personal standpoint, you've seen what Joe Burrow has done for others. How about doing it for yourself, right? You look back at CJ Uzama a few years ago. You look at Hayden Hurst. Joe Burrow has given tight ends the platform to get money. You look at Mike Gesicki, who just happened to get that money in Cincinnati. This is an opportunity for Noah Fant. Will he be here past this year? Probably not, most likely. But this is an opportunity for Noah Fant to elevate his own personal ceiling while also showing that he can elevate the Bengals ceiling. I think it's a great, smart signing. It's the last thing I'll say about it. It's something they never do. It feels like it's one of those layups that, like,
Mhm.
you feel like, teams release guys and you're like, oh, well, the Bengals could really use somebody like that. And then they don't bring him in, right? We talked about it earlier in the offseason with a guy like Jair Alexander, right? But they saw a need in Noah Fant. They bring him in on a visit. He comes and goes, but there was a good relationship built. He goes, takes a couple other visits with some teams that maybe I don't think had quite as high a ceiling as the Bengals have. And they didn't, maybe they gave him more money. right? Maybe they offered him more money, but I think he, again, might have taken a deal that the Bengals offered him because you know what? He saw not only the opportunity to play for a team, compete for a Super Bowl, but to make himself a lot of money in the long run. I feel like that is a big get for Noah Fant in that aspect. So
Yeah.
Noah Fant, he's going to wear number 86, and he's going to play a lot in this preseason. He's already getting snaps early and often in training camp.
We
Let's
saw
talk a
him
little bit about what we've seen, Ayden. We were there. We were there
boots
on
on the
Sunday.
ground.
Yeah, Sunday afternoon was a good day. You can probably see the back of my neck is still kind of red because I did not put sunscreen on, which is on me. It wasn't too hot of a day, but it was very sunny, very sapping heat. The Bengals look good. I think personally, from my observations, and I think you'll agree with this, I think the offense won the day on Sunday. Joe Burrow, his typical self, he had one throw. It was to the opposite side that I saw a video of afterwards. It was a touchdown pass to, I believe, Jamar Chase on the sideline that just like there's no quarterbacks in football that can do those sort of throws with that type of placement and accuracy. Just a one-on-one type stuff. We're seeing, and Joe Burrow has commented on himself. He said he's throwing the ball the best he ever has in a preseason. It's scary for other people,
Yeah.
right? And I think we're going to see it early and often. And as we talk about later in the show, the starters are going to play early and often. Zach Taylor earlier today mentioned they're going to play multiple series this game, and then next week in Washington, they're going to play even more games.
Yeah. Yeah.
Series.
Yeah. Zach Taylor's in town. That's hilarious. Of course, he's in town. Kay Adams is in town talking
Mm.
to Zach Taylor. And in that interview, Zach Taylor did say that he feels like this is the best he's seen Burrow, and he said that he feels like Burrow has gotten better. I don't know what that looks like because I felt like last year was pretty close to as good as you could get from the quarterback position, but I'm all ears for it. And like you mentioned, this past Sunday, he looked really good. Al Golden talked about it a little bit after practice. Like there was just some throws that only he could make. It was a spot where the defender was draped all over him, and there was one spot where it could be caught, and that's exactly where Burrow put it. And it's one of those situations you throw your hands up and you're like, that's tough. That's tough. I felt like from the defensive side of the ball at practice, outside of a couple plays, Chris Jenkins had a big sack. I believe it was DJ Turner had a pass breakup against T. Higgins. They called it a pass breakup.
It
I
was a
probably
tight one.
lean more towards a catch. But they got the stop on that first initial drive from the offense, and then after that, I don't think the first team offense was stopped once. A little concerning, but then again, you're out a couple guys on the secondary. CTP didn't
Yep.
practice that day, so maybe you can chalk it up to that. But the offense looks really good. I mean, surprise, surprise, right? It was interesting. They were moving Shamar around a little bit. Al Golden did talk about Shamar getting a little get gas near the end of practice. He needs to get more into football shape, but he's really happy with just the impact that he can make with his size. Yeah, you make that face. He needs to get in football shape. It would help if he was
No, it
there
all
at
goes back. It's
start
silly.
of the start
Yeah, that's
camp.
why I made the face.
Yep, exactly. But they were lining him up in the three technique a couple times. He was switching it up, and I mean, it was the same thing like a clip from Miles Murphy as well. Like those guys, like as much crap as we kind of give them sometimes for their lack of production, they're just phenomenal athletes. And seeing them in the
Yeah.
open field sometimes is just
I think
incredible.
seeing them in person too, like you
Yeah.
don't realize because everybody on the NFL field is just as big, right? When you're standing against, I'm 6 foot, I weigh about 165 pounds. These guys could pick me up and throw me. Like they are just freak athletes. And that goes for like bottom of the barrel defensive tackles at the NFL level. And these guys are starting and playing. And like you look at like the pictures of Aaron Donald, for example, and you hear about what this guy can do in the weight room. And even at the college level, Dane Brugler does this awesome list called the Freaks List, where there are offensive linemen that are running 4.640s, like
Mhm.
at 300 something pounds. Like these are like football athletes in general are just some of the most
Yeah.
refined athletes on the planet in any sport, just because that's what football demands of you. And look, the Bengals need some of that athleticism to flash in football traits this year. I think that's a big theme of this season. Al Golden's had a lot of good things to say about a lot of the young guys that need to take steps in 2025. Miles Murphy, like you just mentioned, is a great first example, right? The Bengals invested a first round pick into Miles Murphy 2 off seasons ago in 2023. The production has not been there. Even the underlying stuff hasn't quite been there just yet for Miles Murphy. We know the athleticism is there. He is again one of the better RES athletic profiles that the Bengals have drafted over the last few years. They need it to translate this year. And I think Miles Murphy knows, and Coach Golden talked about that in his press conference yesterday, that look, Miles Murphy knows that this is it for him, right? If this year and kind of next year don't go to plan, he's going to go to another team and he will be a rotational guy and he'll have to rebuild from the start, right? He has to translate it this year. Same goes for Joseph Osai, and he doesn't have the luxury of having another couple of years baked into that contract. He's on a 1 year deal. The Bengals saw enough in him towards the back end of last year to reward him with a quote unquote prove it deal, right? For a 1 year, $7-ish million contract, right? Where Joseph Ossai is kind of in a very similar spot to Noah Fant, like I just talked about, right? You're on a 1 year and you're trying to play as well as possible. Now, depending on how he does, let's say somehow he breaks out. Let's say he's 8 sacks. That'd be a great year for Joseph Ossai. There will be teams that will pay him probably a lot more than Cincinnati will. I don't
Right.
want to admit
Yeah.
it, but
I
a
mean,
lot more than Cincinnati will to be like an edge two or even an edge one, maybe. Some team really invests in him. So when you think about what these guys have at stake, and we've talked about this a lot, right? And it's personal for these guys, not just on the football field. Of course, they want to win the Super Bowl. Of course, they want to win games. They want to be as good as they can on the field. But off the field, personally, they are leaving millions on the table if they don't perform this season. So it all goes back to that. The Shamar stuff is very interesting. The way that they're moving Shamar Stewart around on the line is super intriguing to me, and I'm really interested to see what they do over these next couple preseason games with Shamar in real, as close to real game
yeah.
competition as you can get, right? I know he's got a role. He's 100% has a role this year. He's going to play a lot early, and he's going to play a lot often. But I don't know like what his role is going to look like, and it's
No,
really interesting to see.
absolutely. Golden talked a lot about like just the amount of guys that are going to play, which wasn't really shocking to us.
Yeah,
It seems like it's going to be a lot of rotational. There was one package where it was on the goal line. It was kind of goal to goal, like maybe a yard or two, where they put Shamar at the three technique, and they ran TJ Slayton out there as well. They got like the jumbo set
the
out
big
there.
boys.
And
Yep, the big
Shamar was
boys.
part of that kind of jumbo set, so it's interesting. But you mentioned just kind of a lot of these prove it guys, these hungry guys on defense. I felt like you could feel it a lot at practice on Sunday. I know it wasn't the best showing from that side of the ball, but when defenders were making a play, like they were getting up, and it was the entire defense. They were loud, they were talking. I mean, CTB is CTB. He'll always talk, but he was
100%.
talking the entire practice. It didn't matter who it was. It was Jamar more often than not because they talk a lot about liking to talk trash to Jamar because Jamar talks back to him. But there's an edge about this team, especially on the defensive side of the ball. There's a lot more energy than there has been in years past, which you hope that translates to production on the field. And when you're communicating like that, and it seems like you're gelling together, and I believe it was Joseph Osai mentioned that they have the options to kind of just play free. I believe in an interview with Cincinnati Bengals Talk, Joseph Osai talked about how the entire defense could be running the wrong play that Al Golden calls, but as long as they're all on the same page, Al Golden's fine with it. Like that's the kind of style that Al Golden wants with this defense, and it seems like through at least the practice that we saw and a lot of the reports that we've seen, this is a very tight group that wants to prove people wrong. And, maybe they're not the most talented group of
Yeah.
all time, but sometimes that can kind of help set you over the edge. Now we'll see when it actually comes time to get on the field and there's an opposing
Mhm.
defense and you got to actually come up and tackle. But for right now, I mean, it seems like a lot of positive stuff. And one guy that I think flashed a lot on Sunday on the defensive side of the ball is a guy that Al Golden has glowed about. Surprise, surprise. And he said, quote, that they got exactly what they thought out of him, and that's Demetrius Knight, just a guy who can plug and play right away. And he was involved in a lot on Sunday. So, again, I'm a more believe it when I see it kind of guy. But if we're just kind of going based off of, the general vibes of the camp, it was good. Now, the play on the field, they kind of got smoked by the offense. But I feel like
I
a lot of
mean, you think about from a defensive perspective, right? You think about what they went through last year. A lot of these guys, right? You're just giving up what, 30, 40 points a game consistently. That's deflating as a defense, right? Your goal as a defense to get teams off the field, to secure turnovers, to set up your offense in as good a spot as possible. It wasn't there. right? They just the splash plays, the big plays outside of number 91 weren't there last year. So I think that they have that. They have to have a little bit more of that energy early and often this year, right? You look at week number one. I keep bringing this game up because the Bengals have this bogey, right, where they just cannot get off the blocks correctly. And look, there's clearly been a big effort. We're going to talk about this more in a second with the starters in the preseason and all that. But they play a Browns offense in week one that's probably going to be quarterbacked by a 39-year-old Joe Flacco. Behind Jerry Jeudy, their wide receiver two is Cedric Tillman. They don't have their starting running back right now, probably would have been Quidshot Judkins if he wasn't dealing with some of the legal stuff he's dealing with right now. Who knows what his situation is going to be in about a month's time. So it's an offensive line that's really old too, in my opinion. Not like super experienced, but a lot of those guys are very much past their primes. It was a great line like 3 or 4 years ago, not so much anymore. There is zero excuse for that defense to not start the season on a good note, right? They should absolutely be raring to go against a division rival, no less, a team that they've got plenty of history with. There's no love lost between the Browns and the Bengals. There never is. You got a chance to roll up into what's now Huntington Bank Stadium and really make a statement, right? Everybody's expecting the Bengals, oh, well, it's week one. They're going to lose, right? And I'm not saying the Bengals shouldn't lose this game. The Bengals are probably, if you check the sports books right now, I bet you they're probably 7 or 8 point favorites, right? If you had to guess. But again, they were 9.5 point favorites against New England last year. And look what
Yeah.
happened.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, I feel like if you were to ask just the average NFL fan, not the probably the fans that we have, because a lot of friends that we have are Browns fans. But if you were to ask the average NFL fan, name who you think the three teams going to be vying for the number one pick, the Browns should come up in that conversation a lot. I
mhm.
think it's them, the Saints, and like maybe the Giants. I don't know, but it's like, um, yeah, the Jets. Obviously, Justin Fields hasn't been great. Apparently, reports. I don't know, but like this Browns team, like I'm sorry, it's bad. It's bad. Like, and the defense is solid.
There's
Like,
zero excuses. There's zero excuses not to win this game. I mean, we're going to talk about it much more over the next like month, but there are just there's zero excuses.
yep,
They've baked in excuses the last few years in week one, right? Both of their last two week one games they should have won. They played Cleveland on the road a couple years ago, and they had the Joe Burrow excuse with the calf and the rain, right? Whatever. Fine. Last year you had the Jamar excuse and the T excuse. Sure, they've got none of that this year.
listen, I'll even say this, like. I don't think it will get to this point, but say Trey is still holding out by week one and he's not playing in week one. I think even if Trey doesn't play,
They should
I
still win.
think they should still win, and that should not be the excuse to lose. That's
I
how
think, and the big thing about Trey holding out, and look, he's in and around the team. He's still active, right? And who
signing
knows?
autographs on Sunday.
He did sign some autographs right
Coaching up
behind
Lamar and
us.
stuff a lot during camp.
That's what exactly I was about to say. He is very involved with coaching up some of these young guys. Um, and that's good, right? Who knows where discussions are? It's been kind of a quiet few days on that front. It still kind of seems like they're in that same guaranteed stuff, whatever.
Just cool.
But to me, it's an opportunity for some of these guys that haven't showed up to be like, look, our anchor's not there. Who's going to step up, right? Osai, Stewart, Murphy. Which one of those guys can make a step? Cam Sample, right? Which one of those guys can maybe take that jump and take an opportunity that's provided to them? So again, I agree with you. I don't think Trey Hendrickson will be. I think he will be signed by the time this game rolls around. But if it does, who knows? So let's move to this game. We got a game in about a little over 48 hours. The Bengals are in Philadelphia. First game for the Eagles since their Super Bowl triumph over the Chiefs back in February. The Bengals are actually favored on the sports books. If you're betting on these kinds of
Oh
games,
no,
this isn't the podcast for you. Don't bet on the preseason. I don't care who you like, or just don't bet on the
I
preseason.
didn't even know they had odds
They
for.
do. They've got lines.
Oh
You'd
my
be
God,
surprised. You'd be
that's
surprised. The
ridiculous.
Bengals are actually 3.5 point favorites on the road. I think that's more because the sports books have seen the fact that the Bengals are going to play a lot of starters. Who knows who we'll see from Philly? I haven't really seen much of Nick Sirianni's comments. I don't know if we'll see Jalen Hurts, AJ Brown, even on the defensive side, even if we'll see guys like Cooper DeJean,
Jalen Carter.
Kenyon Mitchell, some of those other guys in and along that defense, who knows? It remains to be seen. But when you
Okay.
look towards this game, give me a couple bullet points that you're looking for.
Yeah.
And I've got a couple as well. I'm sure a couple of ours will overlap, but just give me one or two points that you're looking to emphasize here as the Bengals travel to Philly.
Yeah, I think the main thing, and it's the most obvious one, but just how much do the guys play, right? The starters. Like Taylor said, he's aiming for about a quarter. He said, we'll see. He says that this Thursday against Philadelphia is probably going to be the least amount that these starters play. And then as they go throughout the preseason, they'll ramp up more and more. So what does that look like? It's definitely going to be more than a drive. Is it a full quarter? I would be very surprised if it is a full quarter, to be honest with you. I wouldn't be too mad about it. So I'm obviously looking at that. And then the main thing is I think the one of the bigger question marks is this secondary because Dax Hill's already been ruled out. Cam Taylor-Britt's already been ruled out. BJ Hill won't be on the field as well as they kind of work back with injuries and they're kind of just monitoring them more than anything. So who's going to step up on the secondary? Because again, there's a lot of spots up to grab. There's been a huge conversation around DJ Turner this offseason. He's been very high low. So what does he look like? Because he's going to essentially just be CB1 this Thursday. So how does that look for this team? And then finally, and I think this is something that we're all going to be kind of curious about is just what does Shamar look like in an actual game setting? And what does that look like? And where do they have him? How much does he play?
Yeah,
How often do they get him in the mix? So those are kind of the three things that I want to look at. Ethan, I'm sure
sure.
you might include some offensive line
Yep.
conversations. Yeah.
Yeah, I think number one, and it was actually a comment that was just brought up by Zach a couple hours ago, is Jalen Rivers. He mentioned that Jalen Rivers might get some looks at guard. Number one, can we stop the charade? There are three very good free agent guards, and not even very good, better than what they have.
I was, the
Let's
bar is
just say
low.
that.
The bar
Let's
is
just say
low.
that. Brandon Sheriff's a former Pro Bowler, but he's very old.
Yeah.
Will Hernandez and Dalton Risner. All three of those guys are better than what the Bengals have in their building right now. One of them. You don't need to sign all three. One of them, right? I know Sheriff was kind of on the edge of retirement this season. Will Hernandez actually just took a visit with his former team, the Arizona Cardinals, a couple days ago. Risner, who knows, right? But Risner's actually commented on the past about how he would love to play for Cincinnati. Why are we just not like we did it with Fant, right? And I'm not saying that Fant was a bad signing. Why are we not at least trying? Why are we not looking? Why not bring him on a visit? It costs $0 to bring a guy on a visit, maybe a few $1,000 to get him on the charter flight, but they've got that kind of money. At least I hope. So,
Might not act like it.
let's again, why are we trying to plug and play rookies, right? And Fairchild I get, right? And I'm a fan of his and I understand putting him at left guard, right?
Seems
I
like that,
got they
that,
have
that that's it. Like that's already kind of been decided. I mean, he's been
yeah,
running with the ones. I mean, Zach hasn't
he's
come
been
out and
good.
said
He's
it
been
or
good from
anything.
everything we've seen. He had a great
Yeah.
the stadium practice. He had a great clip of him just manhandling dude. Again, no doubt in the guy's strength. I'm excited. He's another guy I'm gonna pinpoint because he's gonna get a lot of snaps. I think he'll run with the twos a little bit as well. I wouldn't be surprised if he gets some extra reps in a real NFL game. Um, I think we're gonna see a lot of right guards play. Lucas
Cody
Patrick's
Ford didn't practice today, by the way, or yesterday. What was I?
He,
Yesterday or
he's
today?
been on and off with practice. I think they're still managing that injury a little bit. He's going to play a lot. Cody Ford is going to play a lot. We'll see how much time they give Rivers. We'll see if they give any other guys a shot at
Matt
that
Reed.
spot. Um, Mims is another guy to bring up because they mentioned this hand injury, right? Which is something that might affect him for a long time. They mentioned that it's not something that's ever going to probably keep him out of NFL games, but it's an injury that he'll have to manage, right, throughout a lot of his career. So, that's something else to keep an eye on with that. But the thing about O linemen, right, is that a lot of these guys have stuff like that, right? This is a brutal and violent game. Football is very unforgiving. There are a lot of these dudes. Orlando Brown Jr. played half of last year on a broken leg, which is ridiculous. So, it's these guys get beat up week in, week out. You're never, not even now, you're never at 100% when you play football. So, that's going to be interesting to keep an eye on is how they manage some of the injuries and all that. I'll give you two guys that I'm going to watch out for. Number one is Jermaine Burton. We've talked a lot about him and how clearly there's been some progress with him. He's been more focused. He's running a lot more. Will he get some snaps with the ones? We'll see. I imagine he will get a lot of snaps with the twos, and he'll play a lot in the second half. You know, can he work his way up that depth chart right now? I think he's listed currently as the wide receiver four,
He
which is
was
probably
firmly
about
with the
where most
twos on
people
Sunday.
put him on a Bengals
Yeah.
presumptuous depth chart. But can he work his way up? Can he challenge Yoshi for that wide receiver three spot? We'll see. Another guy, we mentioned Fant. I'm not going to go too much into him, but I'm interested to see if he does play. I'm not even sure if he's going to play. I think low key he might not play. Well, we could say Fant for Washington then, because he will probably play against Washington. On the defensive
It's like
side of the football, yeah, yeah, I think you're right. On the defense side of the football, how about DJ Turner? You just mentioned him. Again, highs have been really high for this guy. Lows have been pretty low, right? Who knows? I don't know how many snaps Devontae Smith or AJ Brown or any of those other Philly weapons will get. But sharpening yourself in a real game against the scheme you don't have 100% knowledge of is really important, right? I think that he needs some of those reps, and I really think it's a shame, really, that a lot of these guys are still injured. I think Dax Hill is close. I think we're going to see him put pads on maybe later this week. Cam Taylor-Britt, I'm not sure what his
he was at
injury.
practice. He was at practice this morning.
Yeah, so I think they're probably just going to tentatively, you don't want to risk anything. Same with Mike Gesicki. I did read that. Zach Taylor mentioned that if there were a real game on Thursday, Gesicki would be playing in it. But they're just going to hold him out, all precautions. And then, how about watching Desmond Ridder? Let's throw a fun one out there, right? Former UC quarterback. You imagine that Ritter is likely going to be that taxi squad guy that the Bengals roll with all season long in that QB3, where he won't probably be on the active roster most weeks. But let's say Jake Browning gets hurt in practice or something like that. That's an easy elevation for Desmond Ritter, and he'll come right up and be QB2. So again, barring a Bengals blowout, you don't want to see Desmond Ritter in the game, but he's going to play. He's going to play a decent amount. Probably in the third and fourth quarter for points on Thursday. So give me a couple other players, maybe some rookies. I didn't even mention Demetrius Knight, who I'm a huge fan of, but we already mentioned him a second ago. Maybe give me a couple other guys, the particular players you're looking out for.
Yeah, Demetrius Knight, obviously, because he's like we've talked about it a little bit, so we don't have to go too far into it. But
Sure.
he's just been a guy that's been in a lot of plays. It seems like he's always been in the mix. I'll be interested Jalen Rivers because, like you mentioned, just big dude. He was in the mix, and then when Mims was in practice, he got a lot of the first team reps, which I found kind of interesting. Um, and then I'm trying to think as well, just guys who I think, could come in that kind of second squad or something. Oh, a name that I want to watch out for. I had a Jimmy Neutron brain blast. Isaiah Williams.
Mm.
He was kind of flash. He came over from the Lions, correct? Uh,
Yes, during the season last year when they
yeah,
had Charlie Jones got hurt, they
yeah,
needed a returner.
yeah,
And this is when Burton was still dealing with these off the field stuff, and Charlie Jones was hurt, so they really didn't have a guy. Our buddy Bryce Tinson is a big Lions fan. He mentioned that he was not happy to see the back of
yeah,
Adonis Williams, or excuse me, Isaiah Williams.
yeah.
Adonis
He
Williams
had a
is a
ridiculous
Bobcat. He's
catch.
uh, he's here.
He had a
But
ridiculous catch on Sunday. He went
he
up
had a
5 out
fantastic
of something.
catch. Yeah,
Bailey's
he
had
kind of did one of these
head
little
top.
pull it back. Yeah, yeah, a little head top. But not only has he been a weapon in the return game, he's starting to get some snaps at receiver. You imagine that he is still probably on the roster, but there's a real competition between him, Burton, Jones, maybe Chase Brown even. He's returned a few over who's going to return kicks and punts. It's going to be interesting to see who the Bengals run out there early. Jones has kind of been the early guy. He had a kick return last season against Cleveland. Um, Jones will probably get a lot of the one snaps in that situation, but
That's my
Burton wasn't
defense week.
bad when he did it, right? Chase Brown had some decent returns, obviously with the new kickoff as well. So, you know, those are just those are some of the little battles, right? That we've still got a few weeks of camp. There's a long way to go before that final decision has been made, but a lot of those little battles, right? You look at some of the other, young corners on the roster as well. This is an opportunity with these injuries in the secondary. Some of these younger guys, like we saw Jalen Davis get some reps with the ones. It's an opportunity for him to get some opportunities, right? There are real chances for a lot of these young guys to get minutes, right? And look, in preseason, you have to, for a lot of these young guys, it is life or death, right? The roster goes from 90 something down to 53, with a handful of them coming back for practice squad, right? There are not a lot of opportunities to go around.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's cutthroat, and this is the spot you again like those edge guys. Like again, Isaiah Williams. You know, we're debating on if he's gonna, be practice squad versus like actual roster. You know what I mean? This is a guy realistically who's not gonna be making a huge impact, but it's still it's somebody who's fighting for a job. And he's been looked really good, and he's shown flashes, and so I think it's important to kind of sit there and talk about it. It's the fun part of the off season, and it's the situation where it's just cutthroat. It is what it is,
Yeah.
and we'll
And
kind of see how.
one more name I want to bring up before we wrap things up is Taj Brooks, is another guy
Oh,
that has really been flashing throughout camp. The sixth round pick this past year. Um, I really think he's going to get more snaps than people are expecting. I think that he is going to play early. I think that by like mid-season, I think he's going to be cutting into P. Ryan snaps. Because I think he is, and honestly, this is a weird thing to say. I think he's that kind of guy for the Bengals. He's going to be a third down kind of back. He can catch out of the backfield. Had a great catch in practice today off a great ball by Joe Burrow when he was running with the ones, by the way. Notice that. And very good pass blocker in college at Texas Tech. And he also just so happened to run for about 1,400 yards last year for the Red Raiders. So there is a guy there. I think the Bengals feel like they really got great value with a sixth round pick there in Taj Brooks. I think they got a steal. And, I think a lot of the NFL public agrees. I think Taj Brooks could be RB2 pretty quickly with Chase Brown. And I think that's a really exciting duo if that's what ends up being. Not to take anything away from Samaje Perine, who I think has a very big role in this team as well. But I just think Taj Brooks has the real opportunity to jump him on the depth chart. And I think that 1-2 punch of Brooks and Brown sounds like a law firm. We used to have a law firm in the backfield all the way back in the day with Ben Jarvis, Green Ellis. How about Brooks and Brown in the backfield for a new law firm? I don't know. Maybe I just made some. I'm not sure. But
yeah.
P Ryan doesn't really. P Ryan, I really think that Brooks can jump him. I think it's a
Yeah.
realistic thing to think about.
I just think there's a level of trust that you get with P. Ryan.
Absolutely, very true.
Just a guy who's been there, knows the offense, been with Cincinnati, but
Yep.
also earned the trust with the Chiefs on third downs because he is so good at pass pro. He is so reliable. So I think just having a vet like that on the field makes sense. But like you said, as the season goes on, Taj Brooks continues to prove himself, and you just need somebody to take some of the load off of Chase Brown. I know how good Chase Brown was at the end of last year and how dynamic he is as a runner.
He can't have
Today,
30 carries a game.
with his size, I don't know if that's sustainable for a 17 game season. As much as you want it to be, I don't
And
know.
his blocking has improved, Chase Brown, but it's still not the best part of his game, right? His game
Right.
is explosiveness and his, running between the tackles. That's where Chase Brown thrives. And when he's out in the open field, he can make almost anybody miss. But they need that compliment. It's why they brought P. Ryan back, right?
Right.
Because, I think they kind of knew that Zach Moss was a dead man walking on the roster. Khalil Herbert was what he was, right? They decided that they needed that kind of running back in the building. And I think they got a very similar type of running back in Taj Brooks that, I think could really add that second layer to this offense of, not only could Taj Brooks take the ball and carry it, but he's a weapon in the pass game, and he is that sixth blocker, which is really essential, especially, Burrow is so
Especially with
elite when well, not only that, but
his
Burrow is
offensive
so
line.
elite when he's getting blitzed because he's so good at identifying blitzers and putting running backs in the right spots. It's a big part of, again, one of those, we talked about this a couple weeks ago. It's one of those little things those little processors when quarterbacks are evaluating a defense right before a play. That's really interesting. So we'll see how much impact Taj Brooks ends up having. So here's what we'll do to close out the show here. I know scores don't really mean anything in preseason. The Bengals can go 0-3, and it could mean absolutely nothing. But for all intents and purposes, the Bengals are in Philly, 8 o'clock on Thursday. Give me a score.
I don't even know where to begin with the season game.
They've got to sub Burrow back in for a game-winning drive.
I'll go. Why not? Bengals win. I'll go 27-21. How about
Yeah,
that? Why
yeah.
not?
I'll go. I think it'll be a little bit more high scoring with some of the defensive guys coming in late for both teams. I'll go 34-31 Bengals. Let's have a fun game. Let's just air it out. Let's say a late. He did this against the Colts in preseason last year. How about a late Jermaine Burton touchdown from
Oh my
Desmond
God.
Ridder to
Oh my
win the
God.
game? That'll be my prediction. That'll be my
Wow.
prediction.
Wow, what a time to
Burton
die.
from Ritter
I'll
to
I'll throw my prediction out. The defense causes at least one turnover on Thursday. How
I
about
like
that?
that. That's a good call. I would bet that if I could. Even though I just
Oh
said to
boy.
never bet on the
Oh boy.
preseason. Um, so we'll be back next week. We'll have all our observations and thoughts from what we saw in Philly. We'll talk about Washington, where they will be next week. Their final preseason game is at Paycor Stadium against the Colts to close things out. We'll see. Again, that'll be the big theme over the next couple of weeks is how much these guys play. I think they're going to play about 2 series tentatively against Philadelphia, and then I think more, maybe up to a half potentially against Washington. We'll see how that ends up shaking out. And then we'll see how much they end up playing, if they play at all, against Indianapolis. So that'll wrap things up for this edition of the Jungle Fever podcast. For Ayden Crowley, I've been Ethan Sargent. We'll say so long for now. We'll have more Bengals football talk next week.